Tomorrow it's September 15, and we're going to start the month, the Hispanic Heritage Month, September 15 to October 15. So, the shift of the Latino vote and all the topics of the importance of the Latinos in this country, the contribution. So, today we're going to have Dr. Kevin Stuart. He is an assistant professor of political science, director of the Master in Public Policy Administration program of University of St. Thomas.
So,
Welcome to TLC Live. Good morning, Orlando.
good morning. How was your week?
It was very good, and as I was saying, tomorrow. I mean, I'm wearing green, because
You look like a very
festivity.
lemonade drink.
Lemonade drink. Okay, well, I call festivity. Well, lemonade is
Festive.
festive, very
Festive.
festive. So tomorrow, as I was saying, September 15 start officially the National Hispanic Heritage Month. It goes along till October 15, and also September 16 is the Mexican Independence Day. There's celebration everywhere here in Houston. No more than Cinco de Mayo, but they're still celebrating. And I was just last weekend celebrating the Mexican Independence Day with the U.S. Mexico Chamber of Commerce. They invited me as a master of ceremony.
Awesome. All right. The focus has been in Texas and nationally on the Hispanic vote. As you know, Texas has a huge Hispanic population. It's growing, and they're becoming more politically diverse. And they're becoming more active. And Professor Stewart, thank you for joining us. I don't know if you're aware, but Texas Latino conservatives undertook a pretty sizable study of. We knew that there was a shift in the Hispanic vote because everybody's reported on it, from the New York Times to the Post to the Washington Times to the Houston Chronicle and the Texas Tribune, especially what happened along the border in Starr County and Cameron County. We just elected in June the first Mexican native naturalized citizen to the U.S. Congress in a Democrat district who happened to be conservative. So there are a lot of undercurrents going on. And one of the things that we were asked to do is find out, why is this happening? Where is it happening? And what are the issues that are making this tremendous transformation, a realignment, as we call it, in the political process? We know that in the history of politics in our country, for example, the Irish, the Italians all went through, the acculturation, accommodation process that sociologists like to talk about, the actualization process, and then eventually the mobilization process, where they started participating in politics more and more. And, we ended up with Tip O'Neill as the Speaker of the House, and a lot of Irish influence. But the Hispanic population is, I think, at that point of inflection now where it's actualization, but not quite yet to mobilization. Do you see that as well? In other words, do you see room for growth for the Hispanic voice in Texas politics?
Absolutely. I think that's actually happening right underneath our feet. So it may not yet be showing up in a lot of data, but it will get there. So the reason I think that is that a lot of people have been surprised as they've seen the news stories over the last couple of years, particularly this year, and in the wake of the 2020 election, on the Hispanic and Latino shift to the Republican Party. I was not surprised because I used to work for the Austin Institute for the Study of Family and Culture, and in 2014, as part of my work there, we did one of the largest studies of Latinos in America that has been done even to this date. And one of the things it showed us was a couple of factors that we're now seeing sort of work themselves out and unfold. One of them is that, just as you mentioned with previous ethnic and minority groups, voter participation had been quite low for Hispanic and Latino voters, and that started to change. The second really big factor is there were a lot of Hispanic and Latino voters identifying their own politics as conservative and answering questions along issue and ideological lines in a conservative way, and yet casting votes for Democratic candidates. That has profoundly begun to shift.
Yeah, our survey actually, and frankly, I haven't shared it with you, and be happy to, as soon as we finish the program, email it to you, and I'd like your comments on it. But one of the striking things we found is we surveyed 1,200 registered Hispanic voters in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, in the exurbs and suburbs of major metropolitan areas, and large growth potential areas, rural areas of Texas. 61% of our respondents were troubled by something in the Democratic Party, which was absolutely fascinating. And when we whittled it down, we took away the solid Republicans, those that were real conservative and voted Republican in the past. And then we took out those that were not bothered at all. We assumed that they're Democrats. And what we discovered is that the 28% were leaning towards a more conservative philosophy, at least in their political participation, which for me tells me that there's room to grow in Texas for conservative politicians and the Republican Party if they play it right. I often say Republicans can be good about snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, but there's room to grow. And in Texas, for example, if we just get to nearly 50% of the Latino vote going for the conservatives, conservative leadership will remain in Texas for the foreseeable future. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And you could see it as far back as 8 years ago. So the data is really interesting. I'd love to put it side by side with yours to see what's the same and what's changed and the developments and growth. And I think that would be really fascinating. But you can see some of what you're talking about even in the data 8 years ago. So 8 years ago, Hispanics and Latinos were already significantly more likely to identify as conservative than they were as liberal. They were also second only to African Americans in their religiosity, and actually the most likely group to attend church at least weekly or more. Now, you pair that with what we know from elsewhere in polling data that the more frequently you attend church, the more likely you are to vote Republican, and you can see how things flow.
One of the questions that I get asked by a lot of people in the media and a lot of people in the Republican Party, because I see our task at Texas Latino Conservatives. Not only do we try to educate, motivate, and inspire young people to participate, any Hispanic to participate in the political process, we rarely tell them what party to vote for, but we do say vote your values. We obviously articulate conservative values here, but is the difference in the national Hispanic demographics. For example, and maybe you can help us understand this, Florida is somewhat and maybe vastly different than Texas. And yet, Florida and Texas are extremely different from Hispanics in California. And that's something a lot of folks don't understand. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yes, so there are a few things going on there. One is that, and I'm really glad you asked the question because it presents an opportunity to say one of the things I made a mental note I really wanted to say, which is one of the reasons why people are surprised is because they tend to think of Hispanic or Latino voters as one monolithic block, and they're actually not. There are significant differences, and we had data strong enough to break these differences down. There are significant differences between, say, those who are of Mexican extraction as opposed to, say, somewhere in South America. So Mexican and Central American Hispanics and Latinos, or those of Central American and Mexican extraction, tend to be more conservative than those of South American or U.S. born even. Then you have the additional self-selection, right? So the reasons that people, whatever the constellation of reasons is that someone chose Florida, whatever that package of reasons is that someone chose Texas as opposed to California, will probably have political consequences as well. So families are choosing Texas because of our entrepreneurial spirit, because of our religiosity, because of the opportunities that are here. And they may be choosing California for a different set of reasons that are more closely tied to left of center politics.
I want to mention, and I know Andrea wants to jump in, but I really get excited about this because it's sort of dovetailing nicely with our poll. One of the interesting things that we found is that as Hispanics become more upwardly economically mobile, better educated, and move into the suburbs and the exurbs of major urban areas, they start voting like their neighbors. And one of the questions that's been posed to me is how come Texas is going conservative with respect to the Latino community and California is still far left? One of my answers is, and I think I just talked about it, you tend to vote like your neighbors. In other words, if you move out to the suburbs of Houston or the Metroplex and DFW, you kind of vote like your neighbors because now you're living in the same houses, you're worshiping, your kids are going to school with those kids, you're becoming more integrated into the community. But historically, I've been told that the migration patterns over history, for example, in Texas, the Mexicans that immigrated to the state of Texas tended to be from northern Mexico. People that looked at the DF, meaning Mexico City, the center of power of the federal government, as despiseful, high taxing, offering very few services. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the people that migrated towards California were those that were sympathetic to the federal government. And so California taking sort of a left turn and doing a lot of social welfare, they're okay with it. Whereas Texas, and frankly, in our poll, Professor Stuart, we asked some open-ended questions. One of the answers that we got from Hispanic respondents was that they saw the Democratic Party not only as the party of socialism, but as the party of the vagos, which means the party of the lazy, and were handing out too much public money. Does that make sense to you, and does that kind of fit what you've seen?
Yeah. So what I would say there is our data showed that those who self-identify as Hispanic or Latino were significantly more likely to identify as conservative than they were liberal, although they were still more likely to identify as liberal than some other groups. It's just that you had them clumping in the conservative and the liberal end. I would also say I kind of keep neatly divided in my mind two kinds of factors here. One is sort of structural or identity factors about people that tend in one way or another. So this is the sort of thing we were talking about. If you attend church regularly, you're more likely to vote Republican than Democrat. The other thing, of course, is that people give you their vote when you earn their vote and when you ask for their vote. And one of the big changes that we should not neglect from the last few years are both the issue-related changes in the Democratic Party and also the structure within the Republican Party, where they started to actually work for, or began to work much harder for, the Hispanic and Latino vote. So the results in Starr County happened in part because Republicans went down to Starr County and started working not just in the 90 days before Election Day, but in the years before Election Day, with a regular presence there. And as I say, politics isn't magic. You earn people's vote and you ask for their vote.
Dr. Stuart, we've been seeing that, we still need more Latinos to vote and more have conscious that the importance of vote. But regardless that, we're seeing more Latinos voting. But also the demographic on the Latino community. I'm Colombiana. I'm from Colombia. So I'm seeing like 20, 25 years ago start changing. It was like at the beginning, it was more Mexican, still more Mexicans than other countries. But it changed a lot. Venezuelans are coming, Colombians are coming. We're seeing now with the open border, they're coming from all over the Latin America. And we are leaving our countries because we don't want the socialism in the case of the Venezuela. And that's also part of the ingredient why we are voting more conservatives than Democratic.
Yes. So Hispanics and Latinos in the U.S. are very patriotic. And when I mentioned the issue changes within the Democratic Party that have alienated some Hispanics and Latinos, that is one of them. So the 1619 Project, critical race theory, being highly critical of the United States, the Democratic Party elites tend to be significantly more critical of the U.S. than Hispanic and Latino voters, who tend to think the Constitution ought broadly to be left alone. And they are proud of this country. They came here for the opportunity, for the promise, for the American dream. And they think, on balance, America is a great country. And so, if you have a political party's elite structure sort of running down the country, it's naturally going to alienate some voters, and that's exactly what's happening.
I'm glad to hear you say that. When I was younger, I served in the U.S. Air Force at Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, Texas, which is on the Mexican border with the state of Coahuila in Del Rio. And so I've known those communities along the Rio Grande River for many, many years. And one of the things that was sort of not predicted was the gift that the Democrats gave the state of Texas. Um, as you know, Professor, you talk about patriotism. Our poll, when we asked the question, how do you identify yourself to your friends and family? Most of the respondents says as Americans, and then they said Texans. So your observation about Hispanic patriotism in Texas is spot on. But when the Democrats, and this is the importance of messaging, and this is what I try to tell the conservatives, the Republican Party chairs around the state of Texas, messaging is important. So when the Democrats began to bash CBP, Customs and Border Patrol, you remember the New York Times had that famous now article where our Border Patrol agents were allegedly whipping the Haitian immigrants when they weren't. When we send the surge down there of DPS troopers, majority of those are Hispanic. The majority of Customs and Border Patrol agents are Hispanic. Hispanics disproportionately from Texas joined the United States Armed Forces. So you're exactly right. The Democrats began to trash America, to trash the military because of the excessive force in the Middle East. They began to defund the police. BLM started to assault police stations and burn police cars. And then, of course, the national narrative was that CBP agents are harsh people when in fact we know what the majority of their job is to save lives in the massive Chihuahua Desert. Messaging is important in politics, right?
Absolutely. I think you've hit upon one of the big issues now that, as I say, there are some structural features that, Hispanic and Latino families tend to be more socially conservative, more traditional. So that's going to tend a certain percentage of them toward the Republican Party. But then there are the issues and the specific messaging. So crime is a huge one right now. You mentioned defund the police. That went over like a lead balloon with Hispanic and Latino voters.
Right
And
along with
in part,
Latinx.
well, yeah, no, that's an absolute non-starter. Um, but the people who live in neighborhoods most likely to be affected by crime are going to pay very close attention to messaging about crime, and they will vote based on whom they think can keep them and their families secure and safe. And it turns out that crime really hurts um, poor white people, poor Hispanic and Latino people, poor African Americans more than even anyone else. And so when you have messaging that says defund the police or that otherwise appears to be soft on crime, you're going to begin alienating those voters.
Well, well, what it will be the ideal, the message to send to the Hispanic community? We are in a midterm elections, they're around the corner. October 11 is the last day to register to vote. How do we can work together as a community to wake up the people that is eligible to vote and they haven't done?
Yes, so that that has long bedeviled political scientists who study Hispanic and Latino voters. Is that there has, prior to 2020, there was significant reluctance. So less than half of, when we surveyed Hispanic and Latino voters in 2014, less than half planned to vote in 2016. In the 2020 election, for the first time, over half of Hispanics and Latinos actually did vote. So that is already changing. I think that presents an opportunity because people like to get on a bandwagon, get on a winning team, to keep up with their neighbors. So that presents the opportunity to message that this is a thing people are doing. Everyone's registering to vote. You should too. And that's actually the message I would drive with folks right now. One, because it's true, and two, because it's important for people if they want to have a voice in politics in democratic society. The biggest way you have a voice is to register to vote and then go vote.
One of the fascinating results of our poll, Professor, was the tremendous amount of support for the oil and gas industry in Texas among Latinos. It sort of blew us away. About 2/3 of our Hispanic surveyed voters were supportive of oil and gas. And it goes back to what we were talking about messaging. It couldn't have come at a worse time for the messaging from the Democratic side with AOC and the new Green Deal and basically shutting down pipelines. And I think it had a tremendous impact in Starr County, where in the Midland area, for example, where good paying oil and gas jobs are coveted by the Latino community. It allows them to move into better neighborhoods and buy a better truck and move upwardly in the socioeconomic ladder. Did you see that as a mistake by the Democrats in Texas trying to shut down the oil and gas industry?
Yes, so this is in keeping with a 20-year trend of neglecting working class issues and moving the center of power in the Democratic Party to academia, right? To the elites of Hollywood and universities, and for their concerns to be centered. Now, it's still true that a huge number of working class people vote for Democratic candidates, but you're seeing movement from what was a solid constituency for the Democratic Party to the Republican Party, particularly, starting with non-college educated whites, now continuing with African Americans and Hispanics and Latinos. And I think a lot of it has to do with exactly that kind of issue, that the Republican Party has been more foursquare for these working class issues of good jobs, safe and secure communities, opportunities for family, religious freedom, protections, where the Democratic Party has been seen to be focused on almost exclusively on identity politics issues.
One last final comment or question from me. One of the observations I've made, and this isn't in our poll, but is the leadership among Hispanic women, the role they're playing in this mobilization of not only Hispanic voters, but sort of the realignment that's going on. You look down in South Texas, you see Mayra Flores was elected to Congress. I don't know if she holds on to her seat, but I think she stands a pretty good chance. So she's become quite a dynamic leader down there, and she's drawn the attention of even Democrat voters. You have Cassie Garcia that's running, and Monica de la Cruz, all Hispanic women, all younger, all dynamic leaders. Have you looked into that, and what makes the Latina so active in the political process in Texas?
No, that is an interesting recent development that I think is a fascinating aspect for future study. But I have noticed the same trend that you have, and am fascinated by it. And I think I tremendously admire these women for getting involved and taking the political chances. Getting involved in races where people said they didn't have a shot in many cases, and going out there and winning.
It's fascinating.
Well, I think before we go off the air, the best way, Dr. Stewart, I think for the Hispanic community to celebrate this important month is not only become an statistics that we are the faster growing community, but let's make a difference. And how do we make a difference? Well, we need to go and vote, because whether we like it or not, when we vote is our voice, and everything that happens in our daily basis it becomes politics. So everything, the decision that they make at the city level, county level, state and federal level, it impact our life. So we need to go and vote. I think that's the best way to celebrate this month.
That's a great idea, and we, just so people know, on the campus of the University of St. Thomas, we are having a voter registration drive as part of our Constitution Day celebration on Thursday, September 15th. We'll also have a lecture that day from Professor Justin Dyer about abortion and slavery and the similarities between the two in the courts, in the Supreme Court's cases. So come on out, get registered to vote. Stay for a really fascinating lecture.
Is that open to the public?
It is open to the public.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for your time. It's fascinating. We're going to send you our poll so we can compare notes and hopefully have you back. We do thank you for taking time out of your day to be with us and share some of your insights with our audience. It's absolutely fascinating. So, Dr. Stuart, thank you. Thank you to the University of St. Thomas for making their professors available to us. You know, I've always said that Houston is blessed with such wonderful universities, Rice and Houston Baptist University and Houston Community College, University of Houston, University of St. Thomas. I mean, you know, people don't realize what a wealth
that
of
we
knowledge
have
we
really
have.
good
So,
universities here in
we're,
town.
yeah, we're blessed that these professors take time out of their, you know, students because they should be visiting with students and not spending time with you and me, but
I
they're
know.
generous.
And thank you to Claudia Deschamps for always making this happen. Thank you, Dr. Stewart.
Thank you, Dr. Stuart.
My
And
pleasure.
you were mentioning about the gas prices, you know, all the issues that, you know, impact our lives. And also where TLC is being sending these stickers to people.
It has?
Yeah, we've been
Wow.
sending these stickers. I don't know if Mark, our producer, has pictures of the stickers that we've been sending out for people to put it on their cars or everywhere, you know, especially on their cars because look, yo lo hice.
Yeah.
I did it.
So,
He did it. The gas prices.
Yo lo hice. So, yeah, when the shelves are empty or, you know, we encourage people, of course, not to put it on private property and, you know.
No,
but,
on their cars. You know, when
yeah.
you go to
Put it on your gas tank.
and yes, put it on
When
your
you
gas
look
tank.
up and see that you have an $80 gas bill, you know,
Yeah,
fill
exactly.
up your Toyota Corolla.
So if you are one of those people that got those stickers, so please put it on your car, take a picture and send it to us. That way we can also put it on our show because, you know, he did it.
Yeah, he did it. All right.
He did it.
All right,
He
thank
kept
you for
doing it.
joining us. We'll be back next week with another exciting lineup of guests that will be enlightening our citizens in the state of Texas. Again, as Andrea says, make sure you register to vote. You only have a few weeks left, so we need a big participation in these midterm elections. They're significant. There's a lot of issues facing us as citizens, as taxpayers, and of course our country in general. So we need everybody voting. So
Remember,
get registered.
October 11.
Yep.
October 11 is the deadline, and November 8 is the elections date. And stay tuned with us at TLC, Texas Latino Conservatives. So go to our webpage, texaslatinoconservatives.com, texaslatinoconservatives.com. We post our upcoming events, a lot of information. We have it in English and Spanish, and very important,
And
become a member.
And hot races in Texas are endorsed candidates. So if you're
Correct.
in a particular county in Texas, you can go to our website and find out who the candidates that we've endorsed and that we're recommending that uphold the values of the Latino community and us as Texans. So make sure you check that out.
And we're going to have them also in TLC Live. Pues nos vemos entonces el próximo miércoles.
Hasta
Chao,
luego.
chao.